Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation series on the future of work. I'm very excited and proud to have here today with us Mike Gossett. He's one of our alums from our MBA program and went on to have a stellar corporate career working in the sports apparel industry, footwear for many, many years. And I believe he's always interested in innovation. So right now he's an entrepreneur. He started his own company. He's going to talk all about that. And so I'd like to welcome Mike to this series and ask him to say a few words of kind of a overview his background, how he got where he is, his corporate career, how he was bit by the entrepreneurship bug, and what he's working on right now. Mike, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Paulo. Yeah, excited to be here. I'm a 92 graduate of the Eller School. After that, I spent a little over 18 years with Nike in various positions in retail and sales. And eventually my biggest passion is in product creation. After Nike, I worked for Crocs for 5+ years, again in product creation. And then after that little stint, I went out on my own, started my own consulting business, and as luck would have it, got hooked up with my now co-founder, and we started Whiskers Laces. So Whiskers Laces, the proposition there are shoelaces are boring, and we're bringing excitement to shoelaces. So kind of what Stance did to socks, starting in 2009, we're doing to shoelaces. So we're a little over 3 years into it, and it's been a fun adventure.
That's awesome. I see some shoes behind you, so maybe you demonstrate some of the shoes.
Yeah. You can kind of see just, bringing some fun excitement into what is ordinary, just a boring proposition. But again, going well for us. We survived the pandemic year well, and we're excited about the future.
Great. I'd like you to reflect back a little bit on your corporate career, how you evolved. I mean, it's a very exciting industry that you worked on that kind of dealt with rapid globalization, a lot of technology on the supply chain side, a lot of issues with understanding consumers. So I think that there has been this movement towards, if you look at corporations, going from a hierarchical structure to more flexibility and flatter. And specifically, I would like you to touch upon how is the corporate culture evolving? Have you kind of participated in those types of efforts of adapting the culture to the new times? And now that you're stepped away from the corporate world, looking back, how do you see those transitions and evolutions?
Great question. I mean, that was at Nike, one of our maxims there was innovate or die. So it was just from product to supply chain, everything was constantly innovating. And it was really interesting to see how that developed. And then, being a bystander now to see what they've done over the past, almost 10 years now that I've been gone. But I think it's the company that has a vision of the future and knows how to implement it is the one that's going to win, right? And I think from a culture standpoint, if you put in the right triggers and the right processes, the culture evolves with that new thinking. Now you're always going to have people that yearn for the past. But I think, again, another saying from Nike was the only constant is change. So if you don't embrace change and don't think about how we can constantly change and improve, you fall behind. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that really paid off being an entrepreneur is, and even being able to be even more flexible and nimble than a big corporate ship is, being willing and able to change and not being stuck in, hey, this is my idea, I'm going to, grind it into the ground. It's like, if something doesn't work, we're going on to the next thing.
So this culture that's permeated with change, how do people adapt? Do they self-select to be there, or people who oppose, they just leave, or is there a big turnover? How do they keep working for the company?
Well, I think the big thing, which I found out with Crocs, is I think really empowering the people that work for you. As a leader, that's where I found kind of the biggest piece, because I went in there, it was very, very siloed, very, it was the handoff mentality, and I just didn't see that working for the future, and that wasn't how I was used to working. So I brought in more collaboration, more empowerment, and it was really fun to see how that evolved over time. And I mean, there was meetings where I was literally calling on people to comment because they didn't feel like they could or wanted to. But once they got comfortable with it, embraced it, the group just really took off, and it kind of took on its life of its own, and people started to see what could happen. And then change was a lot easier. So I think, some of that is, people got excited about it. People saw a new way to work. They were more engaged. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is how do you empower people and make them feel like a bigger part of the process? I think one of the downfalls, whether you're innovating or not, is when you get micromanaged, or you don't feel like you're not have any skin in the game. You don't have a say. I think people want to be a part of something bigger. And I think that's the key. Whatever's coming down for the technology, a new industry, a new product, if they don't feel like they're a part of it, that's where dissent comes from. That's where unhappiness comes from. And that's where you need to switch that over to get a thriving, high-powered work environment.
That's a very powerful message, right? Empowering people to change the culture and have them think more holistic and yeah. So I mean, we face those issues every day in a large state university, as you can expect. So I think this is a great lesson. I'd like to pivot a little bit to what you're doing today, and how you took lessons from your previous corporate career into developing and advancing the concept of Whiskers. And related to that, how you were able to survive and even thrive in this critical year.
Again, my mom, when I was still in college, undergrad, she, in looking for work and everything, one of her things that she told me, and it was one of the things where I kind of took it in. I didn't dismiss it, but I was like, okay, whatever. But she talked about getting cumulative experience. She goes, don't be afraid to do something that may not be the path you want to take, but it will improve your background. And I think I did a couple of those where I had my eye on the ball. It was more of a longer play, but I was an analyst for 2 to 3 years under the VP of sales. And so I was crunching numbers, but that is a skill that I still do today, and I can do in my sleep. And I love it, but it's helped separate me from kind of the pack in essence. So I think that was one aspect, is I gotta, at this point, being an entrepreneur later in life, of like, I have a much more well-rounded skill set. And I know enough to be dangerous in a lot of things. I may not be the expert, but I know what to do. I know what success looks like. I think the other thing is, and this is crazy for me, but I found the power of a really good process. In anything you're doing, how do you get from point A to point B and map it out and stay on task and be disciplined, be decisive. And I think that's really helped as well, because you really need that in a big corporate environment to hit all your dates and gates and come to market in a meaningful way. And it's even just as important on a smaller scale. So bringing all those things in there, and I think what I've really been able to do is take everything I've learned, and there's things that Nike did well, but things that I thought, well, we could do better, but you just can't because it's a big corporate environment. So I've kind of shaken all that up and trying to put that back into what I'm doing now. We have a very small group. We're very nimble. We can make decisions easily. So just applying all those principles of, I always say, like, I want to act like $1 billion company, even though we're really small. So how do we do that? How do we get more dialed and more exact? And yeah, it's kind of taking everything that I've known and trying to, one, educate people that are working with us, and two, apply those principles earlier than later.
And that's fascinating. A question that I would have for you related to that, right, is we talked a little bit about the future of work, the future of the workforce. You mentioned you have a small group. Are they distributed? Do you feel the need to have them together? How is that changing in terms of people, workforce and workplace?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, and I go back and forth on it because we have half of our group is in Florida and half is in Colorado. So we do a lot on, Google Meet and phone calls, and we have Slack and email and all this. Remote work is definitely possible. I think the one thing that I really miss out on is so much can happen in those informal meetings during a day. And I think that's where I would like to see. There's no really solution for it, but like we try. It's those kind of those hallway meetings where something big comes up or you solve a problem. I think that's one of the challenges. I think communication is probably one of the biggest things that is the challenge in kind of this new environment when we start to go to remote learning. Because Slack is a good communication channel, but it doesn't get the nuances across. Like, you can't see people's faces and emotions, and it's hard to brainstorm on there and just have those transfer of ideas. So I think it's a blend. I think that's the biggest challenge, that especially being in a more creative element, is how do we get people together even though they're remote, and have those conversations and brainstorming. So we, as a group, right now we have 2 weekly meetings just to make sure that we can update and we can talk and we can chat through, and they always go over, which is fine because it's always something fun or something important that we need to get across. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I'm finding with this remote workplace and working from home. I found I'm a lot more productive because I don't have interruptions. But on the flip side, I do miss that kind of informal problem solving, brainstorming kind of energy that you get in the workplace.
Yeah, we're also struggling with that concept as it applies to learning and education. We were forced to go virtual, as you know, but that engagement piece, the peer-to-peer interaction that students benefit from by talking to their colleagues or running into a faculty member, that is really missed. So, but anyway, you mentioned one interesting thing when you said you were an analyst for a couple of years and developed this great number crunching skill. So my question is, things are moving very, very fast, right? And we at the university, we tend to, because that's what we do, we teach education. I mean, we teach skills, right? We teach analytics, we teach software, we teach some leadership skills. So, but I think to be successful in a career, you need more than just the skills. And I'd like you to talk about how do you see those, I would say, the human capabilities coming to the picture and how you acquire them. I mean, you mentioned collaboration, teamwork, those types of things, critical thinking. I'd like you to chime in.
It's a great question. Yeah, because it's funny because I'll relate that to my daughter just graduated high school in 2020, and she's deferring, but she's trying to determine what she wants to study and how. And kind of some of my advice to her is, and I think this is kind of the future, and I've seen a couple different articles, but it's kind of one of those things where I feel like that's who I became over time in product creation, is getting not being a real specialist, but being a generalist and just learning, a lot of hard skills and a lot of soft skills. So how do you get something that's hybrid? So like with my daughter, like she likes engineering, but she's also creative. So, could you get into mechanical engineering and get like a design minor? So she can meld those two together, which is similar to industrial design, but it's getting those skills. And I think that's, some of it was kind of natural for me is, growing up in sports and doing sports is like bringing people together was kind of a strength. But I think that's, as a product line manager, like at Nike, I had to know about the consumer. I had to know about the marketplace, the competition, the retailers, what distribution looked like. And then I needed to meld that into future trends and work with designers to brief them on the future of shoes and what we needed there. So I needed to also have a good design eye. And then when our footwear developers came in, they are the ones that actually built it with the factories for the first time. So I actually learned how to build shoes, the construction aspects of it, the factory, all those. So, and part of it was I was just really super curious. So whenever I was doing something, I wanted to know, how did you come up with the design? What was your inspiration? Then developers, like I would pay really close attention to how they're talking, like, well, we can't do this stitch and, this is causing, binding here or something. I was just extremely curious. And I think it's not a skill, it's more of a mindset, I think, of when you're in a job, like you're always working cross function, but like when you learn more about what's going on with your partners outside of your group, like one of the things I used to love to do was we would get out in the field and we would go around with our sales reps and go to our accounts and look at the accounts and talk to people on the sales floor and learn about what's selling, what's not selling, what are people looking for. So that I think it's just I've always had a genuine curiosity of what was going on. I loved information. I loved strategy. So kind of all that kind of came into play, and I would just pull all this stuff together and kind of put it into this blender. And I think that's where I see that kind of the future of, and people, I think there's even been some articles written on it, like the generalists tend to win more than the specialists. So how do you become a generalist? I think it's, one, it's making yourself uncomfortable. Getting, when I did that analyst job, like I knew nothing about Excel. I mean, and I was like the first couple of weeks, I was just petrified, like, oh my God, what did I do? And I was extremely uncomfortable for a while, but then it started clicking with me. And then I started having fun with it and I started doing more, and it took on a life of its own, and it helped me get that next position at Nike. But I think that's the biggest thing. And especially as, somebody coming just out of college, young, is like, don't be afraid to try new things. I always call it, fill up your quiver with the experiences that may benefit you. You may not see it now, but in 3 or 4 years, you can tap back in and say, oh, well, I did this job, so I know how this works. I mean, and that's, again, some of it was not by design with me, but I worked in retail. I knew retail. I knew how to merchandise the floor. I knew how to deal with customers. I was an analyst, so I worked with numbers, and I worked in kind of a production side thing too. So when I got into product, I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience behind me to move forward pretty quickly. So, I think it's being curious and not being afraid to be uncomfortable in a job, because you can do anything for 18 to 24 months and then move on to something else that maybe pushes your buttons a little bit better.
I think that this is great insight, and I keep trying to relate it to what we do in an educational institution, how we can bring this breadth of knowledge and the interdisciplinary collaboration and understanding the big picture when we are trying to form students and give them skills to hit the marketplace. So I think the future for us will be a lot more around what we call experiential learning, trying to emulate these conditions, maybe working with companies on projects that are already doing that and facilitating internships. So and bringing speakers like you to the classroom and to motivate and to illuminate. I mean, complement what we do. So, I mean,
I got a chance to listen in on some of the pitches last year for the I forget with the dairy
McGuire Center, the entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was to me, it's like things like that are awesome because they have to try and do so many things, and there's so many little nuances involved with it. But I was really impressed with the pitches and the approach and the research. So I think that's you're kind of hitting on it. It's experiential and and getting these kids to think a little bit differently.
Yeah, but I also think it's an exciting time because if you do things right and if you can make progress on those dimensions, we can kind of be a leader in the next stage of education. So anyway, so this has been great. I think you kind of hit all the points I wanted to have you talk about. The background that's necessary, the combination of skills and going beyond skills and kind of challenging your comfort zone. So the breadth versus depth, we visit that question all the time, right? Because in academics, sometimes people want to go deep. That's what we are good at. But you can't forget that you need the breadth, right? You need the ability to connect the dots. But that's an exciting area for us, being a business school. And I appreciate your time.
Sure.
And we'll be in touch.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.